Hey folks, in this video, let's talk about finances of the states in India. India has grand ambitions of becoming a developed nation by 2047, and it needs really high GDP growth on a sustained basis. And that growth truly needs to come at a local level from villages, cities, districts, and mainly from states. So, in that context, a unique decadal study came out from Comptroller Auditor General of India. And according to that report, about 16 Indian states in financial year 2023 that ended on March 2023 registered revenue surplus. 16 states in India registered revenue surplus, while 12 states revenue deficit. And you can see Uttar Pradesh has seen a massive turnaround. Uttar Pradesh used to be a Bimaru state, but in financial year 2023, they registered the highest revenue surplus, 37,000 crore rupees. And all these states from Uttar Pradesh, Gujarat, Odisha, all the way to Goa, they all are doing great as far as their revenue expenditure is concerned. And then you can see all the revenue deficit states with Tamil Nadu and Andhra Pradesh registering quite a high revenue deficit. Now, revenue deficit or revenue surplus is different than overall state finances. A state can have revenue surplus, like Uttar Pradesh has revenue surplus, but it still can have fiscal deficit as far as state finances are concerned. And here's the difference. Revenue expenditure, when you consider, it is the expenditure to keep the state government running. So keep those state government employees employed. Their salaries, subsidies, operation and maintenance of offices, pensions, interest payment, etc. It is the amount of money a state spends on keeping the state government machinery running. And if the taxes that are coming in or non-tax revenue that are coming into states is more than that revenue expenditure, that means the state is running revenue surplus. And if their revenue expenditure is higher than tax and non-tax revenue coming in, then that state is in revenue deficit. So how can a state with revenue surplus be in fiscal deficit? Because states spend more money than just revenue expenditure. Revenue expenditure is just the amount of money that states need to keep the government, state government running. In addition to that, they have to spend on capital expenditure to build roads, transmission network, metro rails, local buses, and so on. So revenue expenditure plus capital expenditure can still be higher than tax and non-tax revenue that's coming into the state. So that is how a state that runs revenue surplus can still be in fiscal deficit. And most of the states in India are in fiscal deficit, including the central government of India. India's central government is also running fiscal deficit of around 4.5% of its GDP. One more finding from the report points to a list of states that have boosted their tax and non-tax revenue. That means more and more of their tax and non-tax revenue is coming from local sources at state level. They are less dependent on the center or less dependent on the central government. I did not know that the states in India legally cannot impose income taxes, state income taxes on income, except for on agricultural income. What happens is the central government of India imposes tax on income for salaried folks and for the people who legally declare their income. And then a share of that central income tax, I think 41% of that goes back to the states. And for states themselves, this is the composition of their tax and non-tax revenue. Large portion of the tax revenue that states get is from state GST. Then you have excise duty, stamp duty, I think sales tax and value added tax. Excise tax is a big one. This is levied on alcohol, petrol, electricity. These items are outside the scope of goods and services tax. In my view, states should bargain or ask for the right to impose state income tax and let go of their right to impose excise duty on alcohol, petrol, electricity. Let them go into GST and then ask for the right to levy state income tax. That's what happens in the United States. In the US, central government imposes federal income tax, and different states in the US impose their own state taxes. But I think the ability to impose income tax at a state level will give states a much wider potential tax net. Anyways, these 7 states have done a great job of moving towards self sufficiency in taxes. Next one, let's talk about freebies. All these states that you see on this list, the spending on freebies as a share of their own tax revenue is quite high, and there is a direct correlation between how much they spend on freebies and what is the debt level of those states. So you can see Punjab spends almost half of their tax revenue on revenues or freebies, and their debt to state GDP level is the highest on this list. And it's a vicious cycle. I've marked these 3 states, Madhya Pradesh, Jharkhand, and Telangana, as an outliers because they have revenue surplus. We talked about that in the beginning part of the video, but still spending such a high amount on freebies cannot be healthy. And this is the vicious freebie culture or revenue culture. When you spend on freebies, it generally generate no future revenue, which means it increases the fiscal deficit. That means you need to borrow more. When you borrow more, you spend more on interest on that loan. And if you're spending more on interest, you have to cut somewhere. You're not going to cut on freebies, so you will cut on productive expenditure, which is capital expenditure. And when you spend less on capital expenditure, it results in higher unemployment, poverty, and then those people ask for more freebies, and then you are stuck in this vicious cycle, which seems to what has happened in case of Punjab. Also, in financial year 2024 that ended in March 2024, all the states put together spent 3.5 lakh crore rupees on freebies. If they could have directed this spending towards productive expenses, it would have boosted current GDP by 4% or created over 4.5 lakh hospital beds or created more than 3 million permanent jobs, and so on and so forth. So states should really pay attention on how much they are spending on freebies. Tamil Nadu is an exception. Tamil Nadu is the only state that is doing substantially better when it comes to increasing manufacturing as a share of their state GDP. No other state comes anywhere close to what Tamil Nadu is being able to do as far as increasing manufacturing's share in their state GDP. So that Tamil Nadu is an exception, but overall, states should not be spending so much money on freebies. Final point is on state borrowings. On this table, you can see states who plan to borrow the highest amount during the third quarter of financial year 2026, which will end on March 2026. Again, if this money is spent on building assets, capital expenditure, it can be a good thing. But if it is spent on revenues, freebies, not so good. In first 6 months of the current financial year, all the states of India put together have borrowed close to 5 lakh crore rupees through debt sale. That means for the entire fiscal year, they are on course to borrow almost 10 lakh crore rupees, over $100 billion. Add to that, if you look at the budget of the central government, they plan to borrow 15 lakh crore rupees. So center and states combined are borrowing almost $300 billion during the current financial year. Again, if this money is spent on capital expenditure or productive expenses, it can be a good thing. But as a nation, policymakers need to think about what can be done so that such huge amount of money is not needed to be borrowed. I think policymakers and states need to focus on a few things. First, states should become more and more self sufficient in terms of income taxes. aim to go towards being a revenue surplus state. Of course, we want fiscal surplus state, but none of our states are in fiscal surplus currently. But first step towards moving to being fiscal surplus is at least become revenue surplus. Cut and eliminate all freebies or most of the freebies in a phased manner. Then you will have enough cushion to direct more money towards capital expenditure, health, and education. And all of us should keep an eye on what our states are doing. I know the central budget, when it gets announced, get a lot of media attention. I think even more emphasis should be placed on state budgets. Before I end, I'll give a special mention to Uttar Pradesh, which used to be a Bimaru state at one point, but registering a highest revenue surplus in financial year 2023. That is impressive. And here is what the 14th president of the World Bank Group, Ajay Banga, has to say about Uttar Pradesh.
Resilience is embedded at the beginning, it is not added later. Heat tolerant seeds, soil matched fertilizers, rejuvenation techniques, efficient irrigation, and strong insurance and financing underpin so that a bad season doesn't become a bad year, doesn't become a bad life. Digital is the glue that holds the system together. Small AI tools on basic phones that can diagnose crop disease from a photograph, that can inform fertilizer choices, it can prompt action well ahead of a weather event and move payments securely. That data trail then becomes a credit history. Better underwriting lowers the cost of capital, lower costs, draw in more lenders. That's the virtuous loop that we want to build. This is not theory. A couple of months ago, I was in India and Uttar Pradesh. I saw all this come together. The foundation, the cooperatives, the resilience, and most importantly, the glue that held it together, the digital system. And it delivered. Proof of concept is it works, and now we need to scale it, and it is scalable. That's the ecosystem we want to replicate wherever possible. That's the ecosystem we want to steal shamelessly. But it only succeeds if government, business, and development partners row in the same direction. That is what is on display the rest of this morning. I thank you very much for listening to me. Thank you.